Hello.
Hey, Louis, what's going on?
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, sounds good. I'm doing
All
great.
right.
Um,
Cool.
it is Louis, right? You don't prefer Lewis?
No, yeah, it's Louis. It's very confusing. It's my parents' fault. They've decided to go with the S, old school spelling.
Yeah, I want to be respectful. Yeah, because
Oh yeah,
obviously you're a badass in comedy, so I don't
yeah.
want to assume right out the gate I'm going with the nickname. I mean, it's my first time talking to you like this.
Don't anger me, or this interview is over. No, it's fine.
But no, I mean you're a sweetheart for doing this, so I'm not too worried about the name thing. I really appreciate you being on the show, man. I mean, it was great seeing you this past Friday at the Funny Bone in
Thanks.
Albany. You were fantastic. I mean, it was a great show all around.
Thanks so
Um,
much.
what was the name of the opener again?
The opener was Cousin Maine.
Cousin Maine, that's right. That was my first time seeing him too, and he was fantastic. And I mean, Attell is one of my favorites. So just all around an amazing show. Is Cousin Maine? Has he been on the road with you and Attell?
No, no, that's the first time I ever met him. Actually, I guess he's a kind of local Albany comic, and that was actually, that's great. You liked his act because he said that was his first time really returning to the stage.
Oh,
So I guess you didn't even notice that you didn't think it was bumpy or anything at all. So that's good for him.
yeah. No, I mean that's awesome. I've been getting more familiar with the Albany comedy scene this past year,
Hmm.
or since things have started to open up again. I've been going out to open mics. I've been I'm mainly a musician. I've started performing again, so it's really cool to see like the real deal come to Albany. But I'm like really curious. What do you honestly think about Albany? I feel like all like comedians say you're not supposed to like attack the town that you're in because don't want to turn the audience. But I feel like Albany kind of likes being made fun of when comedians come through.
Well, first of all, I mean I don't think that's really true. What you don't want to seem is like if there's some kind of already a built-in chip on the shoulder, like you don't want to be a New York City comic coming to the Midwest and or the South and acting like these you're a bunch of yokels. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like
okay.
you don't want to, but you have to do that in like a funny way. Like I just feel like it's all those rules with you can't joke about this, you can't joke about that. It's like as long as it's funny, it doesn't matter. I mean, I feel like Attell, for example, could go into any city and make fun of the city in the right way that would make everyone laugh about it. But in general, Albany, it's like what's a trip is that I've been to almost most of the funny bones and improvs in the country because it is a chain. Uh, and at least at one point or another in my career. And Albany, so close to New York City, I'd actually never been there before. So this was my first time to check out the city. I mean, really, I would say, it's just the only thing that's tough is getting used to the health regulations that are still in place in some places that still are in place in Albany. Like they have plastic divisions up between different sections, I
Yeah.
guess to prevent droplets spreading. And I think that really does block some of the laughs from coming forward that we can hear on stage. So the whole time the crowd sounded a little muffled. And I know that might sound like I'm making an excuse for a not good show, but you were there. You had a good time. It
Oh,
really is a difference in the sound that we can hear. And there was the one of the they were doing it at the Comedy Cellar here in New York City for a while as well. And you can the sound of the laughs travels differently when there's a plastic barrier up. So there's that as far as the club goes. But they're looking out for people's safety, and the staff there was really great. They seemed really on top of it. But as far as the city goes, all I could say, I didn't get a chance to explore, but not a lot of late night food options. And the other thing I noticed there was like it seems like there's a law that if you open one pizza restaurant, you have to open another one a block away. There's many pizza restaurants, but not anything else.
yep. Very accurate, but I'm glad you enjoyed the Funny Bone at least. I don't even know what you're really talking about. Like I thought the energy was great. Like I wouldn't have noticed the muffling of the laughter, but I was also directly in front of you, so I had the good
Mm.
spot. I mean, I lucked out. Um,
We're really attuned to that, especially like a room. We know how many people are there and what it should sound like, and we're like not really. It's not like we're changing everything that much, but it's like it's an instant feedback loop. So when the laughter, we know what it's supposed to sound like when that amount of people are really roaring.
yeah,
And it's not. It just didn't. There's a muffledness to it, it could be the high ceilings, which is never going to change, but I really think it's those barriers. It was as if we were like it was a hockey game or something, or like a SeaWorld or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, I wouldn't have noticed. It was a fantastic show.
Thank you.
So, is this like a thing that you're doing with Dave, just like for all of his upcoming shows? How long have you been touring with him?
I mean, he's one of the first comedians I ever worked with, so I've known him a very, very long time. By now, he's like one of my oldest friends in comedy. Because when I started, I'm a little bit of a dirty comedian, and I still am a little bit of a dirty comedian. And so, a lot of clean other comics don't want, if they're not dirty, they don't want a dirty opener. So the only people they could really book me with were other acts that were also work blue. So some of the first people I worked with were Dave Attell and Doug Stanhope and other comedians like that, because they didn't care. So I've known him probably now, maybe 15, 17 years. And, and it's basically right now, he's worked it out, so it's either me or this other New York comic, Ian Fidance, are opening for him on the road. So pretty much if you see Attell on the road, you're either going to catch me or Ian, or sometimes both of us.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I definitely hope to catch another one soon. I'm going to be coming down to the city more soon, so I'd love to catch more, but it was really a fantastic performance. So when was your first album released, If These Balls Could Talk? 'Cause
I think that's 2011.
So how long was that after you had started?
That's about 10 years after. And every album I recorded probably at least a year before it came out. About a year, almost exactly.
Okay.
So
as far as like developing your joke writing, do you feel like at this point you're just writing jokes faster? Like, are you already well on your way to another hour? Or would you say that's more of just a direct correlation with how much time you're putting in?
Well, I am well on my way. I had to take a year off because of the pandemic. I was hoping to shoot an hour work on it through 2020 and then shoot it at the end of that year. And then, of course, I had to take a year off basically from doing stand-up. But right now I do feel like I'm very close to a new hour. And yeah, it does get easier as time goes on. I just kind of like know the process. I know myself. It was actually a little bit harder to get back into it after the pandemic. Funny enough, performing, I didn't feel as off. That came back pretty quick, especially when I'm doing old jokes. It's kind of a muscle memory, so I can do them by memory, by the rhythm of them. I just can fall back into the rhythm and kind of remember the words. But as far as the writing process, I'd kind of forgotten how not difficult that can be, but how like you need many drafts, like writing anything. So it's like really, I write something, even if I write something and try it out and it works, it's still about tweaking it and how can it work better and how can it work, even better. And if I do something and it kind of works, well, it's saying like, is this a good enough concept? And how can I change it so the concept works,
Yeah.
So it's taken me a while to get used back on track with just that kind of detail of joke writing and how it works. But right now I'm feeling good about it. I got a couple like really new bits, actually a lot of new bits since we've gotten back open up, and I'm feeling good about it. I'm actually going to start, maybe even after I'm done with this interview, looking into how and when I'm going to shoot a special.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to hearing it. I've after the show, I checked out your most recent album, Katzkills, which I have some questions about. But I guess while we're still on the topic of writing, I was wondering, when you're like learning things about the theory of comedy, like early on when you're having realizations about like your process for writing, do you feel like a lot of it is like slow build, like strengthening certain muscles when it comes to the skills that you're developing, or was there a lot of like big realizations that it come in just like big moments of clarity where you learned a new skill?
Well, it's like anything that you learn, it's there's a I forget there's a term for it, but of course when you're starting out, you have so much to learn that you're taking these huge leaps all the time. You know what I mean? You learn one thing and it's like wow, it's a big thing, and after a while you've learned most of the basics and you're fine tuning, but there's always something to learn. So I would say like when you start out, there's so much to learn that there's giant steps all the time. And then I guess the big leaps now are still significant, but they're just not happening all the time necessarily, because I just been doing it so long. I kind of know what I'm doing. Does that answer the question, or is that not really what you're asking?
You know, that answers the question. I feel like it's kind of a mixed bag either way. But are there like obviously there's a lot of fine tuning, so a lot of it is just repetition and muscle building. But do you have any examples of like a lesson you learned where it was like, oh, you saw this comedian do this thing and it really it illuminated some part of the writing process for you?
Sure, I have a lot of things like that. Well, one is that I remember some early on things. I'll give you two early on things, and then one thing that I just saw the other week that got me kind of back in the writing loop. Early on, I started in the San Francisco Bay Area, and back at the time it was very segregated. The black scene and the white scene were totally separate almost. It was all San Francisco was kind of the white scene, and Oakland was kind of the black scene. But I would work all the different rooms, and I can still remember the gig I did where I learned when your rhythm and delivery is really right on. This is what I'm talking about, why it was like the muffled laughter was messing with my timing a little bit. When it's really locked in, instead of it being a monologue that the comedian is delivering, it's actually a dialogue where the joke is one half of the conversation and the laughter is the other half. And the laughter informs how you deliver the next line. And the first time I ever realized that was working these black, mostly black rooms in Oakland. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but I remember noticing that and being like, oh, wow, I can really play off their rhythm of laughter and deliver a line with a different rhythm afterwards. And that just clicked with me. You know, there's that. So that was a big lesson in the beginning. Even just knowing that, like, if you insert pauses in certain places, that will trigger a laugh. And I remember I learned that, and I was like putting pauses everywhere for a while. I was like, oh, there's too many pauses. So then you have to cut it back. Yeah. So those are like big lessons that I learned probably within the first 5 years of comedy. Like those two things, for example. And then just the other week, I went to see Ali Wong, who's a very good friend of mine. She and her opening act is this very funny comedian named Shang Wang. And me and Ali and Shang all moved to New York about the same time. So we're very close. And I went to see them at the at the Beacon Theater the other week here in New York. And Shang, he's a really amazing writer. He's a great comedian. Shang Wang, you got to look him up. But he does a way of writing where it's not just the joke that's funny, it's the things leading up to the joke that are funny. And even things that aren't funny, he finds a funny way to say them just by choosing certain funny words. And remembering that that's part of writing, because like I'd forgotten, because the break from the pandemic really opened up like a big thing for me as far as writing goes.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing all that because it's really interesting to hear all of, like the theory of comedy type things, because, you know, like coming from music, I feel like music theory is very laid out, and obviously there's subtle things that you kind of figure out on your own that can't necessarily be put into words. But I feel like for a lot of beginning comics, that's kind of the lay of the land. Like a lot of it is not really out there, like just to read. Like there's stuff to read, but it's not like you can't just pick out those skills so like easily.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that are like I've read books. There's some, I forget her name, Judy something, I think. There's a book called The Comedy Bible, and there's another book on late night writing. And I never took a class, I never read a book. I just kind of started learning, and and I just started doing it, trial by just dove into it. But I read these books, I'm like, wow, they really are articulating the different ways a joke can work,
Yeah.
Personally, I think, there's so many, here's another thing. I think there's too many comedians right now. And I think a lot of these comedians have learned it like formulas, and they learn it like math. They're not inherently funny people, but they decided to do comedy for I don't know what reason. And they're applying the formulas. And the real problem with there being too many comedians is that everyone, I mean, if you can figure out the formula, you could write one or two decent jokes. They're not even that bad. They're just not that good. That's the problem. Is they're all kind of mediocre, because if you put that formula, these different formulas into action, you can figure out how to write a joke. Now, whether that joke is really original and really funny and has the right twist or whatever to make it really pop, that's another thing. So there are those formulas that you can learn, and I use them too. But as far as like really having a funny essence and really being able to use those formulas to the greatest extent possible, that's something inherent, I feel like, to a certain extent.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, it's like a similar thing with a lot of aspects of comedy now, like podcasts too, and everything, where it's saturated. And so I can definitely see what you mean. How it's like the more visibility, like obviously there's gonna be more people reaching that height, but it's still definitely like a clear difference when you see someone who's been doing it for so long and is so seasoned. So it's just good to hear your perspective on all these things, like the lay of the land and the mechanics of the comedy.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I got real technical, but I've thought a lot about this stuff.
I'm sure.
I have like not funny, serious things to say about this funny art form. So sorry about that.
No, like I said, it's great hearing about it. One more thing on to backtrack to what you were saying about just like the funny way a comedian says something. This is something I've thought about before. Like, I was just curious if you have any other examples of someone whose wording is so important to like making something funny. Because for me, someone I've thought about before in that vein is the late great Brody Stevens. Because I feel like he'll take something that's like a non sequitur. It's not even necessarily. It's almost just like a fact that he's pulling out, but he says it in a way that the delivery just turns it into a joke.
Yeah, I mean, Brody, if you haven't checked him out, he's super hilarious. You know, rest in peace. But first of all, he had a very like unique way of speaking. So he had a very funny cadence. And then also he would also pick these random facts there's something about specificity is also a classic thing that's funny, you know, having a very specific example of something, because it paints a picture. The whole thing about it is kind of funny. Like I went to college and I learned to write in college, and I had to like kind of unlearn how to write like that because it's not funny language. So, you know, you use the right words to describe something. That's not funny. If you're using academic words, what you actually have to do is paint a picture, and a lot of times specificity will do that. So I'm sure he picks random facts or whatever like that, but it makes you picture something in your mind. That's always funnier than just using just regular words to describe something.
Yeah. Are there any other comics in that vein that you would think of? Like, obviously you gave the example of Cheng Wang, but is it like...
I mean, Attell's like that. I mean, Attell's like that, you know what I think he's like? He's kind of like that, you know, that thing about that Hemingway tried to write the shortest story. You know, these writers will have these contests to try and write the shortest story, right? And he has this, what is it, the thing about him where it's like baby shoes for sale, never worn, right? And it's like, it tells a whole story in a sentence. And I feel like, I mean, that's a tragic version of that. But Attell will do that in a funny way. He will just have a sentence, and you can picture there's a backstory, there's a whole world behind it, and it just kind of this whole world kind of explodes in your mind, and it's literally that short. It'll be a sentence. He moves on to the next one, but briefly you can see a whole world that happened before the sentence that he says, and a whole world that happens after it, because he's painted a full picture of a character. You know?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that about Hemingway either. That's like, I mean, that's like profound, but also kind of hilarious to hear in this context.
Yeah, he would do that, and also, you know who else would do that was Kurosawa, the director. Him and his buddies would like try and tell a story the shortest way possible too. And it's kind of cool, you know. It's like it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean that's kind of like getting it deeper than it has to be. It's just about painting the picture of it, you know. And I'd say like there's many other comics that do that, but it's like if you look out for what I'm saying, this painting the picture, you'll see it in probably most good comics.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, it's interesting hearing your take on it, because you know, I see what you mean in Attell, but I guess I didn't even think of him specifically when I was asking the question. But it's like you're absolutely right. Like there is like a powerful imagery in the way he kind of unwraps the joke.
Yeah, and it's also just like word choice. Like that's what I mean, where it's like inherently funny. Like none of those books, those joke formulas, can't teach you what the funniest word to choose is in any situation. You know what I mean? Some words are going to be funnier than others. You know, sometimes it actually is about using like a academic word in like a non-academic, not an academic word, but like a fancy word in a not fancy setting, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what it's like. Or sometimes it's just about the funniest sounding thing, you know, like what's the funniest dinosaur? I don't know, probably pterodactyl. You know, kind of, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I can't explain why, but it is. I think they're funnier than the other dinosaurs. You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. One more thing I want to tell before I move on to Katzkills. It's just I can't stop thinking about it. One of my favorite lines from his album Skanks for the Memories is just when he said he's got a joke about approaching a woman at a bar, and he just throws in, just completely out of context for the joke, I'm wearing clogs. And like that alone has nothing like to do with the rest of the joke, and just the fact that he adds like that word, like it's one of my favorite lines of the whole album.
He's got a lot of lines like that, and you know what's I think important, that he's got where they're just random like that, but they do paint the picture, but they're very random. And also I think that line, if I remember correctly, because that is like probably my favorite comedy album of all time, is like I don't think that line even gets a big laugh. There's a couple lines like that, or there's another line where he gets hit in the head by a horseshoe, and he goes, "Oh, you ruined my night vision." And I don't even know what that means. I've been meaning to ask him, like, what does that mean? He probably will be like, I don't know, I don't remember, you know, whatever. But I think there's those lines like that they don't even really get a laugh from the audience, that are so important to keep in, because people like us will pay attention to them on maybe when you listen to it the second time. It's those details that keep people coming back, because they're like, what did that even mean? Let me listen to this again. It still kind of doesn't mean anything, but you keep trying to attach meaning to it. I've got jokes I did a story for This Is Not Happening, jokes that that kind of go over the crowd's head at the taping, that in the comments, multiple people are like, that was the best joke, you know?
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, it's like sometimes you just got to like have faith in the joke and just put it down anyway, you know?
Yeah, it's like you said, like the joke doesn't even really have to make sense. Like the night vision joke from Skanks for the Memories, like that hits so hard, but I don't, like, again, I don't know what he's even trying to say. It just...
Me neither.
But yeah, that's one of my favorite albums too. I mean, just like genius writing. But
yeah, it's amazing.
But man, like I was saying before, Katzkills, your newest album, like your writing is so tight, man. I mean, everything, like every sentence counts, and
thanks, man.
I love the jokes on that album. I got about halfway through If These Balls Could Talk so far, and I mean that one is just as killer, despite being a while before. But this material on Katzkills, there's like a few things I thought of when I was listening to it. Like you have a great joke about New Year's, and I don't know if you want to talk about the joke at all, but I did want to ask.
Sure.
Since you have this joke about hating New Year's, do you have a particularly bad New Year's story to kind of go with that sentiment, or is it all for the joke?
I mean, I definitely have several bad New Year's, and I have a few good ones too, you know. It's just, I mean, the core of the joke, without giving it away, if you listen to this, look it up, or maybe you can even play it for them, I don't know. But it's just a hype thing. It's anything when you set expectations that high, it's why prom kind of always sucks, you know? It's like anything where it's supposed to be the best thing of all time is rarely it, you know? Yeah. Very few things live up to the hype, and the more something's hyped, the more disappointed you're going to be. So that's what that's really about, you know?
I'll try to play something. I gotta listen and make sure it's not gonna get me in trouble. If there's,
I think you can. I think that one's pretty clean. So, and you can feel free to bleep it if you'd like, because I think it should play actually.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, you seem to be a real interested in process and stuff like that. Man, I was trying to write that joke for so long. It took me so long to write that joke, and it was so hard to express and to find the right words to do it. And so that was like a real victory when I finally got that done. But yeah, that was very hard to write. It took me years.
Now, can I hear one of these New Year's stories though? Like, what's your worst New Year's you've ever had?
I mean, it was like I was with some friends and we weren't sure what we were gonna do, and they were just like, we're going to try heroin. And then they tried it in the other room. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I hope you don't die. And I was in the other room. I was like, all right, try the heroin, like whatever. And yeah, that was like depressing. So that's a bad one.
That was almost your best New Year's. You really missed out.
Yeah, it could have been. I'm so freaked out. I've just never done any like kind of intravenous drugs, and so to me, it really is like next level. I took Dare, scary for me, and so for them to do that, I was like, they're gonna die, and it's horrible, and they were fine. But you're right, it could have been the best New Year's ever.
Oh, I would have been terrified.
Like, you're not even participating. I'm just like, it's also we didn't do anything because of that, because that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, I have to. My New Year's is ruined by them possibly ruining their whole lives. Great, it's all bad all around.
Oh yeah, I'm like the mom figure in the hang. I'd be the same way. I would just be worrying about them the whole time.
Yeah.
But good story, I guess.
That's just what came to mind, man. I don't know. There's been plenty of good New Year's, but that was definitely a bad.
No, that's very funny. That's exactly what I was looking for. Perfect story for this. So back to the Katzkills album. Is it about like, were you really thinking about the Katzkills, like the area, when you came up with the title? Because that's like by where I'm from, so that's what I think of. But you do kill in the special, so I get it,
Well, it's also just like kind of a reference to like, I was thinking about. I wasn't like dreaming of. It's more like a Borscht Belt like commentary on like the old school Jewish comedians from like back in the day up there at those Catskill resorts. And I'm kind of I don't know if I'm a new school version of them because comedy's evolved like 10 times over since they were around. But I'm definitely like I'm a Jewish comedian performing 40 years later, and this is a modern version of that, maybe.
Okay. Well, I didn't even realize that there was a history of comedy up here, because I'm very familiar with resorts around the Catskills. I mean, I'm from a town called Greenville, very close to Catskill, New York, and there's like the big thing in the area is resorts. Like around the town, there's a bunch of resorts that are still going, and a lot that closed down in the past. Like it used to be an even bigger area for it. So I've heard about musicians that like historically worked in the area, but I didn't know that about the comedians. Oh
yeah. So I mean, I have what I believe to know about it. I'm sure there's people listening that probably know more about it than me. But like, have you ever seen Dirty Dancing?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, Dirty Dancing takes place in one of these resorts. It's almost like a family summer camp, from what I can tell. And a lot of comedians, they basically, like, that's where Mel Brooks got to start. He would go up there, and his job was basically just to walk around and be like a live clown at all times. Like, slip and fall in the pool, you know what I mean? Like, spray spray himself in the face with seltzer, like, goofy stuff. Besides that, there's also comedians that would go there and just perform, do that in the circuit there, and that was just a way a lot of these comedians, and that's what the term Borscht Belt is about those resorts, that they would just these comedians would just kind of work those resorts, a lot of them. Okay. So that's where that comes from.
Okay, I've heard that term too, and I was like starting to kind of get a picture of it, but that helps a lot. Like I said, there's so many abstract like terms that like as far as the history of comedy goes
there's like
styles.
The Borscht Belt is like the Jewish resorts. The Chitlin Circuit is like the black clubs and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, I really love the new album. As far as your next album goes, I'm definitely really excited to hear that. But have you been like while you're working on new material, have you been doing a lot of like podcasts or other things like that?
No, I've had 2 of my own podcasts in the past, and I didn't really like. I mean, I don't know. I ended up quitting both of them. They were both good. I think they were good, and they were all right. But I just don't. My own. I'm not really built for the podcast model. Really, I find it a little bit too disposable. I don't know. I like to create things and have and add things to my body of work.
Okay.
And it's a very old school way of looking at things. It's pretty backwards. It's not helping my career at all.
Well, it's cool that you're that you recognize that and you're true to it. Like I get it. I get that that's like a one way to look at it.
and it also isn't really up to my, like, I can be funny off the cuff, although you couldn't tell from this very technical interview that I just gave, but, I can be funny or whatever, and I can certainly talk at least, but as far as it being my strength, I think writing is more of my strength, and so it doesn't really showcase that, or it could showcase that, but it would take a lot more work. It'd have to be a different kind of podcast. So yeah. I haven't really nailed that down. One thing I have found is that I can't be doing these outside projects if I'm not motivated to do them. And I know that sounds like, well, you're just lazy, do it. It's your job, do it. But it's like the product isn't as good and they're not as effective if I'm not into it. You know what I mean? It just isn't. Like, it won't work if I don't want to be doing it, if I'm not passionate about the project, So I have to find a way. I'm still struggling all these years later to find some kind of form of social media or podcasting that I can be passionate about, and then also that I can put out at a regular pace, which is really the hard part of it all. Is just that you have to keep churning stuff out, and I find that very daunting. I made a lot of videos when I first started out, and I just kind of stopped because it was so hard to produce videos, and people produce videos like it's nothing now. But I add all this production value and this craziness to these videos, and that's not really what people need. They just need any kind of content. Content is what it's about, and not about having all this different stuff in it. And my mind works like at a crazy thing where I want to include all these things, and I got to teach myself that that's not really where it's at.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a tough thing all around. You say like, oh, it's tough to be, funny off the cuff and plan for a show like that. And I'm kind of in the same boat with this radio show because I've mostly talked to musicians, but I love comedy, and I know that I want to be able to set a comedian up when I'm talking to them. I don't want it to be all technical. I want to help them riff, and it's a tough thing to just create in the moment like that, and it's like a muscle I'm still training, so I can't even imagine.
That's not on you. That's on the comedian to do it. Like, the thing about it is I like talking about this stuff, so it's like I really went for it because I like talking about the technical side of comedy. Other people don't overthink it like me, and they'll just be riffing, and they can do the same thing and just riff on it all, which is probably what I should have been doing the whole time. But I really like talking about this stuff, so I made a bad choice, and now you're stuck with it. So enjoy.
I love both sides of it too. I love the technical stuff, but also it's like I want to, for my own training in being a good radio host, but also because I would like to get more into stand-up. I mean, I've been doing open mics just because I love it. I love the writing and everything, but I'm still such an amateur. It's hard to conceptualize, like, how do I make myself the optimal host,
It's all good, man. You're doing it. It's like you can just ask people, crazy questions. Like, man, you threw out things like, what's a crazy New Year's? That was good, Yeah, and I kind of bit, but I gave a sad heroin story instead of a hilarious one.
Oh, I thought it was hilarious. Don't worry.
Thank you. Thanks.
But yeah, man. I mean, it's. Like I said, I'm really glad that I can have on great comedians like you on the show because it helps me like train that side of things. Because I as much as I love talking about the technical stuff on the musical side of things, I feel like a comedy interview is its own art in itself. Like, do you have a particular favorite interviewer in that field? Like, who would you say you like to hear talk to a comedian?
Well, I mean, two things. One, I think like Mark Maron, he brought to podcasting, and people don't really, I don't know if people appreciate this, is that like, anyone can podcast, anyone can get on the radio, but it's different to be to really be a true broadcaster, And this is someone who had years of radio experience interviewing people. That's why his interviews seem to have like crescendos to them. They almost seem like they're leading somewhere because he knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for years. So I think Maron's really great on that. And then the other thing is my favorite book on comedy is this book called and Here's the Kicker. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So it's this interview by, I think, a guy named Sachs. I think his name is Michael Sachs. I'm not sure. It's a series of interviews. And what I really love about it is, first of all, they're more in depth. They really ask, you like process? This guy asks questions about process. But second of all, they're not just performers, they're writers. And a lot of times it's the people behind the people. So it's the lady who helped Letterman, who created the Letterman show with David Letterman. It's the person who's writing behind the scenes when Sacha Baron Cohen does Borat. You know,
Yeah.
it's the person. You know, Annie Hall. Woody Allen wrote Annie Hall with someone else. It's the person he wrote with. You know what I mean? And I just feel like those people give you a whole nother perspective in the real nitty gritty craft of the whole thing. And the guy keeps asking questions. Like, it's just more in depth. It's about process than about you know, gossipy whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So that's why I really like that one. I highly recommend it. And the kicker is
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely got some reading to do. I'm glad you brought up Mark Maron, because I had a question kind of related to him. You know, you have some like references in your comedy to other aspects of different arts. Like you make reference in Katzkills to to Beethoven's Fifth. You make a reference to Robert Frost's, what's it called, The Road Less Traveled? Is that the name of the poem?
Yeah, I don't think that's actually what the poem's called, but yeah, it is that.
Yeah, you definitely I won't give it away, but yeah, I don't I know you changed it a little bit from what he said, but the fact that you're referencing these other artists like that are more out there, it's a very artsy way to tie your jokes together. It reminds me of Mark Maron's whole bit about Captain Beefheart. Do you know that bit?
No, but I know Captain Beefheart. I know Maron's. How's it go?
He just talks about the experience of getting into Captain Beefheart, which I'm a huge Frank Zappa nerd, so that I get who Frank or who Captain Beefheart is, but that's such a deep cut, I feel like, to non music nerds. So but the way that he connects that that more out there artistic concept to just the general crowd, he delivers it in a way that everyone can kind of relate to. And I find that fascinating. But hearing you... go ahead.
Well, I would just say that, he's doing that, but he's not delivering that joke to everybody. He's got his own crowd. And they are, cultural, I don't want to say snobs, because I think it's just good taste. But they are, they have a certain kind of tastes, And so he's able to do that. I'm in front of crowds. They're not necessarily my own crowds. There's some of them are my fans, but a lot of them aren't my own fans. So I can't be dropping references like that. They're not going to work. And also, he's the cool thing about the ones you just mentioned, mine and his. I mean, he probably talks about specifically how it's a weird thing to get into, but pop culture references can really date things, and they can really exclude people. And especially now, another thing with the internet is that there's not really shared cultural experiences anymore. There's things that we think of as classics or things that everyone should know that I think people don't really know anymore. So you got to keep that in mind. And sometimes I try to avoid cultural references because you're just missing a lot of people. Plus, it'll sound dated really quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from on it. I was kind of I guess the way I'm looking at it is it's obscure reference, and even though it's more likely his crowd would get it, I think he does a good job of pulling people in around the reference. Even if they don't get the reference, they still find it funny. The process of it, the fact that it's so obscure and specific.
Well, also, Captain Beefheart is funny, man. That just sounds funny. If you don't know what Captain, you can not know what. That's the other thing is that you can have a joke that works on two levels. This is for people that know what I'm talking about and people that don't know what I'm talking about. So, without having heard the bit, I could see myself, if someone just says to me, hey, Captain Beefheart, I might just laugh if someone says that to me. Just those words. Captain Beefheart sounds crazy, It
is go on.
There just is that where it can work on both levels. There are people that can get the reference and people that can just sound funny too. And so there's that as well. But yeah, also just with the music thing, music's actually also my first love before comedy. So, not that I'm a musician, but I'm just a big music fan. I still am. And so I try and apply things that I've appreciated in the artists I like musically to my own work as well, in stand-up, stuff like that.
Well, I was going to ask anyways, because I usually have musicians on the show. What are some of your biggest influences in music? What are some of your favorite albums?
Oh, man. There's so many. I really like Charles Mingus.
Oh, me too, dude. Good,
yeah.
good stuff, man. I love Mingus.
I love Mingus. I love Sly Stone.
Nice.
I love the Pixies. I love Fugazi. I love Beastie Boys and Wu-Tang Clan. You know, it's all showing my age more or less. But I mean, that's just general stuff. And I only really listen to jazz when I'm writing. So it's kind of messing up my Spotify algorithm. But lately, it's just a lot of different jazz and stuff like that. But the thing I was going to say is, like, mostly, like, what I apply, you know, when I can is just, like, I really love when you see artists evolve, you know, where an artist get their own voice and then move in a different direction and still keep that voice, but also change it up. I think that's really, really cool. And I think that's kind of the goal. And it's hard I think it's hard for comedians because we're kind of always just trying to be more and more ourselves. We're not trying to experiment. You know what I mean? It's like no one wants to hear a comedian do something too far out. You're always trying to hone one voice, whereas I think musicians are able to take that voice and switch it up in different ways. But still, I look for that. I try and make sure that I'm evolving, that it's something different, that it's something that challenges me. You know, and I think there's artists who really have done that over their careers, like the Beatles, the Beastie Boys, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Who else? I mean, Tom Waits only has like kind of two phases, but he has, you know, those kind of things, you know?
Yeah.
And I just think that's like really cool and really commendable to say, like, okay, I'm a master at this one thing. How can I switch it up? And, you know, whether I can do that or not in comedy, I don't know, but it's something I aspire to.
Yeah, man.
Damn, this is so pretentious. I'm really embarrassed.
Oh, it's okay, man. I love Charles Mingus just as much. You know, not everyone's gonna dig it, but I'm glad to hear. And Fugazi's interesting. I used to be way into punk in high school. Did you ever listen to Minor Threat, the Ian MacKay's band before that?
Yeah, sure. But, you know, it's like I also I thought I was into punk when I was growing up, but I guess I really like more like post-punk. To me, punk was like I really like that band, the Minutemen. You know the Minutemen, right?
Dude, that's like my favorite punk band of all time. Good.
All right, so there you go. So Minutemen, right? They don't sound like hardcore. Like hardcore, like it's weird how punk is supposed to be this wild, crazy thing got very rigid and very much like this is what punk is, and it's so basic to me. And to me, also, like what I said about having a clear voice, like the Minutemen, man, like they take all these different influences and they make music that like nothing sounds like it. It sounds like the Minutemen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude.
And I think that's like really when all art is really good is when it has like such a unique voice. The Pixies, nothing sounds like the Pixies. I mean, like a lot of people emulate the Pixies, but the Pixies themselves, nothing sounds like that mix that they have there of all those different voices, I would say, you know, between the different band members. And I mean that as much as the guitar is a voice, as much as the singing is a voice. You know, Nothing sounds like that. So when you can do that, I just think that's what I thought punk was to say, like, it's whatever I want it to be, you know?
Yeah, man. Dude,
and to do it yourself and to make it be whatever you want it to be. That's what it is to me, you know?
Yeah, that was like the whole Minuteman ethos, dude. And that's like, that was something that influenced me a lot, is the fact that they could bring in all those genres and still influence that movement in their own way. Because they were in the punk scene, but they don't sound. They have blues, they have country, they have jazz, they have classic rock in their sound, but it still somehow comes together to fit the like history of punk rock and shape it.
Yeah, it's just the energy and the do-it-yourself kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I really, it's definitely like, I mean, like all that stuff, like it really like inspired, like it's why I just started doing it, like without taking a class or anything. Like I had a band in high school, but it was always like you just do this stuff yourself. So it was like it's hard to explain because comedy was so different back when I started. But this idea of like starting your own shows was kind of like new and weird. Like people didn't really do that, and me and my friends, we tried to start our own regular shows, and we would try to just like. We'd get up on. I mean, it's not going to be that amazing because comedy is so pervasive now. But like, it wasn't cool back when I started, you know. And it was we'd get up on a table and just do a show at a house party, you know, and things like that. So we really took that kind of ethos and kind of applied it to comedy back when we started, you know, in the Bay.
Well, yeah, man. Like I said, it's really interesting hearing your thoughts on your process and how you got into things. It's really cool hearing your take on music and its relationship to comedy. And This has been a great interview. I hope I didn't keep you too long, but I really appreciate you coming on. It's really awesome talking to you about everything.
No, man. Thanks for having me, and just to people listening, like, I am funny. So please just look at the albums, listen to Katzkills, listen to If These Balls Could Talk, and also check out my story on This Is Not Happening, which is on YouTube. So check all that out to see what all this all this pretentious overanalyzing can actually lead to actual funny material. So I promise. So check it out, please.
Yeah,
and to follow me on the things, you know, on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. As Louis Katz, Louiskatz.
Yeah, I can't recommend the albums enough. You're like a true joke writer, hilarious stuff, and I hope to see another one of your shows soon. But thank you again, Louis.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.